Moji is the newest support added to Paladins in the Feudal Fables update. That's right, she's a support now. It's absolutely crazy. This is possibly the single biggest class change we've had in years, going back to the beta. Like, the last major class change I can remember that was actually before my time was Buck being reworked into a flank from a tank. So this is pretty extreme, and in this video, I'm going to be walking through how this character works in detail. I'll be going over some day one builds that you might be looking to try, as well as giving some general tips for this character because she is quite unique when it comes to the support class. So without further ado, let's get started. So, let's get started by talking about Moji's abilities and all of the changes that they have done to turn her into a support. She is still going to feel very familiar to anyone who's played Moji for a while because, mechanically, she's still mostly the same. However, there are a lot of brand new features and quirks to this character that end up making her actually rather sophisticated and definitely a skillful support if you want to min-max her and get the most out of her. First of all, she's had a base health increase. She now has 2,400 health, which I'm using the health card at level 1 to bring it up to 2,450, and with the health card at level 5, you will get a staggering 2,650 HP right out the gate, which is pretty impressive. And her primary fire is, well, it's similar in a lot of ways to flank Moji, but also very, very different, as you will see. So first of all, let's talk about the spit. This does 450 damage now, and the projectile speed is a little bit slower than the projectile speed of traditional flank Moji, so that'll take a little bit of getting used to. But it also has a few added quirks now as well. One thing is, it now explodes. So you can see there, we're exploding next to the Cassie. We actually get a little bit of fall off at this range. But yeah, it's basically like, kind of like having Boom Boom and Base Kit, except it really functions more like any traditional explosive rather than the weirdness that was Boom Boom. And another thing that's important to note is that the spit will pierce through teammates. Which, you know, yeah, didn't it always do that? Isn't that, like, how it's supposed to work? Well, that's important to mention because of her spray. So her spray now applies healing to teammates, as you can see, and it will put magic marks on them. And if we left-click and hit the spit on Fernando, we will detonate those magic marks. So the whole marking mechanic has been shifted over to her healing as opposed to her damage. If we spray on the enemies, you can see it does do some damage, but we don't apply stacks to the enemies. The marks are now purely for the teammates, and they do a lot of healing, and this has its own quirks. But as you can see, if we pierce through the Fernando here, we will basically detonate the magic mark and then also hit the Cassie behind him, doing healing and damage at the same time. So that's why the piercing through teammates is so important. But yeah, this whole magic mark mechanic has a lot of unique quirks as well. Obviously, if you detonate a magic mark with fewer stacks, you will get less healing. And if you detonate at level 5, you will get this very nice heal over time. So, very important to detonate at max stacks to get the maximum amount of healing possible. And also, these marks have an AoE. So, you can see that the star is green there. If I back away from Fernando here, it'll turn white. And when it's white, I am no longer able to be affected by the AoE. So, any ally within range of the magic mark, including Moji, will heal when the mark is detonated. And as you can see, if I just detonate this mark while in range, you see those plus signs happen on Moji, and so that's just transferring the mark's healing to Moji as well. So she gets the 500 and then the burst over time. Basically, the AoE healing is equivalent to whatever you do based on the mark. So again, let me go over here, get shot by the Cassie a little bit, bam, and then detonate on Fernando. We get the 500 and then the heal over time. So it makes her a very powerful area healer. As you can see, the AoE is very long. If I just put some marks on Fernando again, yeah, it's a pretty large AoE. It's actually larger than her spray. So that is very, very nice. And as a teammate on Moji's team, you will also be able to see that mark. And so you'll be able to know whether you're in range to get the AoE or not. And of course, when we combine both the spray and the spit on one target, it is a lot of healing. It is no trouble to out-heal this Cassie, but you have to be careful because the spray consumes the resource meter you can see at the top of the screen. Once we run out of spray, we're going to have to wait a little bit to recharge some of it, so resource management is going to be very important. And honestly, it might seem like a problem at first, but she just does so much healing. Honestly, I think the resource meter is very necessary to keep her in check. The healing is frankly disgusting. Now let's talk about her other abilities, starting with the Scamper. And the Scamper is very familiar, except with a new quirk. It travels infinitely. it basically acts like Victor's Hustle now, where you just keep on going and going and going and going. And you can still bunny hop with it. I'm really bad at bunny hopping, but you can kind of see, yeah, we were able to sort of do it there a little bit, I think. I'm really bad at it, I'm sorry. But, yes, bunny hopping is preserved with Scamper, and that is the only tech that they have brought back with Moji. Obviously, you can't do Magic Barrier tech, because you can't mark the enemies anymore, and sadly, there's no animation canceling on the ultimate either. Let me show you that before I go over the Magic Barrier, because the ultimate is mostly the same. You just cookie someone, and then if you collide with them, you eat them. The only thing that's different is now, as you can see, there was a burst heal. And if you eat the cookie, it will heal you for 50% of your maximum HP uncauterized. So just like a Ray ult, except it's personal healing only for you. You don't heal your teammates with it. And I think the reason it was done like that is because, well, you're eliminating one enemy from the fight. So being able to heal your teammates with that as well would be pretty disgusting. But yeah, now let's talk about the Magic Barrier, which has been renamed to the Magic Shield. This will provide shields to Moji and her allies within a certain range. So let's pop this. And you can see Fernando is slowly gaining a few shields. Now, the way this works is you provide a 100 burst shield on your teammate, and then while you channel the magic shield, you'll provide an additional 400 shielding over the duration. But for Moji herself, she will instead have a 600 burst shield, and then an additional 400 over the remaining duration. So she gets a bit extra shielding, and that is to keep her safe, because otherwise she's actually pretty easy to dive, funnily enough. So that extra little burst of shield can bring her up to a very impressive amount of HP. It's an extra 1,000 shielding in total. It's basically kind of like activating Buck's recovery, except it's made out of shielding. So it doesn't get affected by Cauterize, but it gets affected by Wrecker. Bit of a different dynamic going on there. But the range on it is pretty short, as you can see. If I just back away, we stop generating shields on Fernando. It's kind of similar to the spray range. So if you can just think about how long the spray distance is in your head, that's about how long the shield distance is as well. So her ability are very unique, as you can see. She retains a lot of the unique qualities that Flank Moji had, but transferred into a sort of new dynamic where she is now a support focused on keeping her teammates alive. She mainly keeps them alive through a bunch of healing, but also uniquely shielding. She is now the most shield-heavy support in the game. You have other characters like Pip with Mega Potion, or Furia with the shielding card technically, or Genos technically now with the shield card, but Moji is the only support who's really focused on it, which kind of makes her more similar to Torvald than some of her other supports in that regard. But yeah, it is a pretty nice dynamic, and she is capable of putting out some insane numbers throughout the match, as long as you're keeping tabs on your shielding, your healing, and, you know, generally doing a good job. But now let's talk about her talents, of which there are 3, of course. And the first one, and arguably the best one, at least when it comes to healing, is Spit Shine. This will cause Spit to now heal allies for 350, and this is independent from the marking mechanics, so you don't have to have marks on them at all, you just heal for 350. And it also increases the movement speed of any ally hit for 20% for 2 seconds. So this is a very good talent. As you can see, if we just put a mark on Fernando and then shoot him, we get the 500 plus the additional 350. So it massively increases the healing you do on a max mark, but also still I can just keep on shooting him. And yeah, we do that 350 every single time. This actually gives Moji a form of long-range healing as well, if you're good at hitting the projectiles, because as you can see, all the way over here, I can still heal Fernando. It's not a lot, but it still adds up. And yeah, if we combine it with the mark healing, I mean, goodness gracious, the healing is absurd. And yeah, that's just another great reason why knowing about this pierce, where you can pierce through multiple allies and also hit enemies, is important. Because if you can get people lined up in a row, you can be very effective at doing multiple things at once, doing damage and doing healing. And yeah, the movement speed boost is pretty nice as well. Next up, we have Realm Runner, which is the sort of hybrid healing talent from Moji, as I like to call it. And I think it's a little bit worse than Spit Shine, as of right now. It could use a slight healing boost, in my opinion, but it harkens back to the idea of Toot Moji. As a matter of fact, it uses the same icon, and it's effectively the same thing as Toot. So when you enter Scamper, you leave behind a magical dust cloud that lingers and heals for 600 over 3 seconds to any ally that stands in it. The cloud lasts for 4 seconds. And guess what? Scamper also has a 4-second cooldown. So, if you are skillful enough, you can potentially get infinite uptime on this Scamper Cloud. But as you can see, it's not really capable of keeping Fernando alive here. It's just a supplement to your healing, which, you know, Spitshine is also a supplement to your healing. But this is a bit harder to micromanage, because you also have to use your Scamper for it, which you may not necessarily want to use your Scamper for healing all the time, because you might want to use it to escape. So it requires, I would say, a bit more skill than Spitshine. Potentially, I guess maybe in some comps could do more healing than Spitshine, but yeah, it's just kind of... It's a different way to play Moji, and I do appreciate that they've kind of kept the Tooth playstyle in, because it was a very popular talent for her. And then finally, I know I skipped this talent, but that's because it's the most unique of the three. Jubilation is the talent that if you are a flank Moji main who misses flank Moji, you will want to play this talent. This talent makes it so that magic marks are once again applied to the enemies, just like traditional flank Moji. So as you can see, we put the marks on Ying, and it's not quite the 2-tap we're used to, because it only does 800 damage instead of 1000, but it still does a lot of damage, especially for a support, who now has more base HP, has the ability to, before entering a fight, channel Magic Shield to get 1,000 extra hit points, and also has a much better movement ability, because now this Scamper travels infinitely. So, yeah, it's a bit of a trade-off, a bit of a different kit, but the playstyle is still mostly intact if you are someone who enjoyed it. So, I'm super happy to see this. And yeah, it does a lot of damage. It'll be slightly harder to play as well because you have to manage the resource meter of your spray. But still, I mean, we can one-clip this Fernando here. Not bad. So now, let's talk about her cards, because she has quite a few very unique and interesting cards, and also a few cards that seem, less important. So first of all, we have the Armor and Weapon cards, which mostly remain the same from old flank Moji. We have Fluffy, which grants increased max health. Symbiotic, which is new. This grants increased sparkle capacity, so just a little bit more ammo to heal with. We have Peppy, which generates ultimate charge when triggering a magic mark at max stacks, so if you want to spam ults with Moji, then this is definitely a card you can use. And then we have Will-O-the-Wisp, which I believe also remains the same, and thus is probably still trash. It increases your movement speed by up to 25% for 4 seconds after getting an elimination, which I guess isn't terrible, but there are just so many other cards that you need to prioritize with this character that I don't really think you'll ever need to use this. Then we have the Spit cards, and these are pretty neat. So Nature's Blessing allows you to grant allies up to 25% movement speed for 3 seconds after being healed by Sparkle, which now that I think of it... What? Why is this Spit, but this is a Sparkle card? I don't understand this. I think they didn't update this icon or something. I don't know. It's very confusing. But yes, this is a very good card. 3 seconds of 25% increased movement speed, potentially, on multiple allies. That's pretty good. It's pretty nice. Next up, we have Morning Breath, which reduces Sparkle self-slow by up to 100%. So... another one of those cards that's not super impactful, and I believe it also is bugged as of the time of recording this, although I could be mistaken on that, but not a super high priority card. Then we have Greater Good, which is a very interesting card. This allows you to grant up to 100 shield hit points to an ally who receives maximum magic marks. I actually want to show this in a build. I do have a build made for this. So if we head on over to Fernando here, and then apply this to him, you can see he now has a shield. But when I detonate, the shield goes away. So the duration of the shield is entirely dependent on the duration of the magic mark. And if I just wait here, when the magic mark expires, so does the shield. So this creates an interesting dynamic where if you're actually spraying like this, you're probably not going to get that much value out of the shield, unless the enemies are really putting your teammate under heavy fire. And even then, it's just a 100 shield. But if you want, you can prime your teammate with a magic mark before they enter the fight, and they'll go into the fight with that little bit of extra HP. And also, another thing to consider when priming your teammates before they go into a fight is, well, as soon as they take some damage, you can be ready to go, instantly hitting them with that 500 or, 850 burst heal if you're using Spitshine. So, yeah, that's one of those areas where a bit of skill will really be able to shine through on this character in terms of micromanaging your marks and, yeah, making sure you're priming teammates when you can and really just having good knowledge of how to apply the shield, how to apply the heals. But, yeah, ultimately the shield is pretty small, only 100 hit points at level 5. But it is a very consistent shield to apply because, you know, you can build marks very quickly. If your teammates are constantly under heavy fire, that is going to be extra healing for them. And you can apply it to multiple teammates at once if multiple teammates are in the spray. So it still can be very impactful. And another thing to consider is, you can buy Guardian with this character, which you might already be doing anyways for your magic shield. And then that will also affect your card, raising it to a 145 health shield. Then finally, there is also Dense Woods, which increases the duration of your magic marks by 0.8 seconds. So if you are one of those players who wants to think about priming teammates and really getting all sophisticated with that, then this could potentially be a card that might be okay. But I, once again, really don't see much of a use for this card because some of her other cards are just better, straight up. And speaking of the cards that are better, let's talk about the Magic Shield now. These are some of the most unique cards they have created in a while, and I have to commend Evil Mojo for this. And one of these cards in particular, Harmonious, is actually a card that grants Moji another niche. And that's because Harmonious will regenerate 3% sparkle and ammo for every affected ally every quarter of a second while channeling Magic Shield. So, at level 5, this will regenerate 7% of your ammo every quarter of a second, or in other words, 28% of your ammo every second. And over the course of the Magic Shield, that's basically over 50% of your ammo in total restored, which can be very powerful not just for Moji, but also for certain characters. For example, even on a character like Bomb King, if he's running the ammo card, having 50% of your ammo restored, that's several seconds worth of bombs that you can continue to throw out because of his fire rate. Or restoring ammo on ROM, well gosh, that guy's just never going to have to reload then. And so this card is going to be very, very nice for Moji. It's very strong, but I think that's okay because it grants her a very unique niche, and it also synergizes very well in a build that I will showcase later. But then we also have Glimmer. This will reduce Magic Shield's cooldown by 0.1 seconds, so up to half a second, when detonating a max stack magic mark. So this is a very powerful cooldown reset build, and this is another card that'll play into a build that I'll showcase later on. We also have Cozy, which heals allies for 6 whole hit points every quarter of a second while it's being channeled. And this card will go up to 30, so this is one of those cards that'll really only be impactful at a high level, because, I mean, a base starting level of 6 is very small, but at level 5, if you do the math, this ends up being 120 healing per second, potentially to your entire team, while the Magic Shield is being channeled. So it's a bit of extra sustain that can potentially help keep you topped off, and also keep you healing yourself and healing your teammates while you're using your Magic Shield. So, kind of a niche card in the sense that, yeah, probably won't run it in every single build, and at a low level like this in this build, it may not be the most impactful thing in the world, but it's still a very interesting card, and you could potentially develop a playstyle around it. And then lastly, we have Shimmering, which will grant allies affected by Magic Shield up to 15% crowd control resistance for 4 seconds. The duration is very good. The potency, less so, but it is global crowd control resistance, so it affects both hard CC like stuns, and also, you know, knockbacks and slows, and the stuff that Sentinel counters, so I guess that's pretty cool. And then finally, we have the Scamper cards. Boop will increase your movement speed by up to 40% for 2 seconds after using Scamper. The duration seems short, and technically it is, until you realize that Scamper only has a 4-second cooldown, so this card will end up having about 50% uptime if you're constantly scampering, which might make it a worthwhile card to run if you're playing the Toot playstyle, or Realm Runner as it's called now. But otherwise, if you're not scampering as much, then this card is significantly less valuable. The other cards are simply focused on keeping you alive during scamper. Scoot will give you up to 20% damage reduction, kind of like Cardio Victor's card. I forget what it's called, but yeah. Then there's also Scurry, which will grant you up to 100 healing every 0.3 seconds during scamper. Actually not a bad self-sustain card. If you want a little bit of extra healing, it can be very nice. And then Wobbles, which is a weird card, if you ask me. This can grant up to 50% slow resistance while using Scamper. I don't see much of a reason to use this unless you want to specifically design a build where you're going up against Inara, Nyx, and Pip at the same time, which is very rare, so yeah, I don't know, a bit of a weird one. But that now leads us on to the builds. I've done a bit of experimenting, and I've done a bit of theory crafting, advanced maths and trigonometry to try and figure out the best thing for this character. Okay, it's actually not that complicated. There's one very powerful synergy with her cards right now that I think is immediately going to be the meta. Or at least, in some ways and shapes and parts and forms, it will be vaguely associated with the meta. Let's just put it that way. So here is the build. We have the magical combo of Glimmer and Harmonious, and this creates a very nice gameplay loop where you are able to spam out a bunch of heals, then spam out a bunch of shields, and rinse and repeat. So the way this works is we basically just do a bunch of healing to Fernando. Look at me, I'm playing Moji. I just realized I'm playing the damage talent. Yeah, so you do this to Fernando, right? You detonate the magic marks once they're full, yada yada. Then you pop your shield, and that will regenerate your ammo. And then you detonate more magic marks thanks to the ammo you just got, and your shield will be almost off cooldown. And with a little bit of Chronos, this all of a sudden becomes much nicer. Also, by the way, you can cancel the magic shield early. I forgot to mention that. But yeah, this lets you enter a cycle where you deplete one full bar of your resource, and assuming you detonated as many magic marks as possible, you will be able to activate your shield, and then once your shield is over, you'll have a full bar of ammo ready to rinse and repeat. And this doesn't look like the most fluid thing in the world when we just have one Fernando here, but if you're able to mark multiple teammates, then the card will proc even more, allowing you to have a very fluid gameplay loop. And with Chronos 3, this feels very, very good. We just do this, bam, 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 and then shield. There's our ammo all the way restored, as well as a bit of ammo back for Fernando, and then we just do it again. Ran out of ammo, but guess what? I've got my shield back, ready to go. This will be significantly worse if you miss your shots, and that is something that is very important with Moji. Something that I really appreciate about this character is that she is the first skill shot support to be added since Mal-frickin-Damba. That's how far back we have to go. Okay, technically, like, Pip and Grok and Ying got some talents added later that made them skill shots, but Damba was the only one with a skill shot in base kit. Every other support that came out since then, you know, Furia, Saris, Io, etc., have all been auto-aim heals. I thought the days of skill shot supports were gone because of controller players, because skill shots like Maldamba are really hard to hit on controller because you don't have aim assist for heals. But Moji's here, and she's all about the skill shots, and she's a very, very unique support in terms of her healing playstyle, and so I really appreciate that. But yeah, it does mean that if you're bad at Moji, this will be a lot harder to get value out of, but I still think it's very, very good. Because without Harmonious, you tend to struggle a lot on your ammo economy, because her ammo regeneration isn't the fastest, and even with Symbiotic, you still don't have that energy regen that you need. But this will grant you that ammo regen that you need, and again, will also support your team in the process, so it's just a really nice card. And yeah, Glimmer giving more magic shields is very, very nice, and if you do run Glimmer, then I found it also is actually unironically pretty good to go for Guardian. Because Guardian will serve two purposes for you as Moji. You will, A, grant your team more shields. Look at that. That's 3 bars for Fernando right there. That's pretty good. But also, it'll act as a self-sustain tool for you, because your magic shield is an ability that grants you extra health. And look at that. With just one magic barrier, we're almost up to 4,000 hit points, thanks to Guardian, and, well, the health card at level 1. So it's actually not bad at all to go for that if you are going for a build such as this, where you're spamming the cooldown of Magic Shield like crazy. Of course, you do also have to consider your team comp when you're going for an item like Guardian, because if you also have Fernando and Torvald on the same team, then the enemies are going to be buying so much Wrecker for you, and so at that point, it might be better to go for a different survival tool, such as Armor Plating or Veteran, because at the end of the day, the shields you give your team aren't going to be really impactful at all anyways, even with Guardian. And there's no point in buying it for your self-sustain either. So if you're up against a lot of Wrecker, I still would advise going for Armor Plating or Veteran instead if you want a survival option. But in a situation where you have someone just like Inara and maybe Azan on your team, or Terminus or someone like that, then yeah, they're not going to be buying that much Wrecker. And even if they do buy a Wrecker, due to the slow heal rate of the shield, Wrecker isn't even really that impactful when it comes to Moji's shields, because they're a shielding over time effect. So like, oh yeah, she applies like 200 shielding per second. You don't need Wrecker to destroy that, but it will still provide your teammates 200 extra health. So it's a very, very unique tool, and it makes Moji very impactful, especially in late game. But yeah, just to round off this build, we also have 4 points invested into Nature's Blessing, because this is a really good support card. It provides 3 seconds of 20% movement speed at level 4, which is very nice. I like it at level 4 because the number matches perfectly with Spitshine. Except Spitshine is 1 second less. Ah, gosh darn it. But yeah, you can stack these 2 cards, and I believe there will be some diminishing returns, but if we're doing this to Fernando right now, he's going to be getting in the ballpark of somewhere between 30 and 40 movement speed. Which is really good. I mean, that's without him buying Nimble or using any of his own card effects, so that is very powerful. And again, it can be applied to multiple teammates. If I just spray and hit multiple people, I'll give multiple teammates that movement speed boost for 3 seconds, which is very nice. Very, very nice. But yeah, we can talk about a few other builds while we're here. This one is a build that is focused on shielding, so this is definitely one that you would run in a situation where you're allowed to spam shields as much as possible, and a situation where you're buying Guardian, because we have Glimmer at level 5, we have Greater Good at level 5 for even more shielding, and we also have Harmonious at a bit of a lower level, but it will still be very helpful. And so we can do this to Fernando, and we can let Cassie shoot off those shields, and bam, there we go, pop our magic shield. And you can see, it does take us a second longer to get our max ammo back, but the cooldown reduction is still the same, and that's the important thing, because it's a shield-focused build. And so if you want to have more shielding numbers than most tanks in this game, this is the way to do it. Is it the best build? Probably not, unless you're really trying to min-max how much uptime you get out of this specific card, but it is there if you want it. And then finally, I have this HP focus build, which is, it's kind of there if you want, I guess, extra sustain, but also it's kind of like, in my idea, her damage build sort of thing. I don't know. I could try and experiment more with these other cards, but I found this is just reliable, and reliable, in my book, is generally pretty good. So we have Fluffy at level 5 for maximum HP, Glimmer once again for cooldown reset on the magic shield, so that way we can have our shields up as much as possible and just get the most HP, and then we still have Harmonious for regeneration, and then just some filler cards, including Scurry for a little bit of extra healing. And this will provide us actually a ludicrous amount of HP. Check this out. So we have 2,650 HP by default. If I buy Veteran, we are now up to 3,127 HP on a support. Oh my god, that's like Grover with his health card. That's like Lilith. That's crazy. But then, we press the magic shield. 4,500 hit points. So if you want to turn Moji into a tank, this is the way to do it. Rush Veteran, rush Guardian, get the Chronos, and do the things with the damage and the stuff. It's not quite the immortality of the traditional magic barrier. But I mean, come on, that's pretty good. Is it not? That's pretty darn good. And as you can see, we are still able to get our cooldown reduction, even if we detonate on enemies. So the card is not specific to your healing marks. It also applies on your damage marks. It just says magic mark. Simple as that. So yeah, this build will work with the damage playstyle if you want, and I think generally building for that much health is going to be something. It'll certainly be at least somewhat viable, so yeah, there's also that build. But yeah, let's talk about a few other Moji tips before we end off here, because I have noticed some things that might be helpful just in my brief testing with this character. So first of all, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but Magic Shield works in sort of a weird way. You can't really pop it like reflexively to take damage. It's not as good for that as the old magic barrier. So you can still get some value out of it because of the burst shield, and sometimes you will be forced to do that. But something you can do with it instead is use it before you enter a fight to power up your teammates, and then quickly go in. The shields only last for 4 seconds, so you have a brief window of time to actually go out and do this damage. But it is still a way to sort of power yourself up and enter the fight with a ludicrous amount of HP and get to doing damage. Because if you use it in the teammate or in the enemy team's face, then you have to realize that when I'm doing this, I can't do damage, so they're just going to be shooting at me. It's the exact same thought process as using Buck's recovery in an enemy's face. They're just going to shoot you, you're not really going to be doing anything. They'll often out-damage your sustain, so it's better to just shoot them. Except, recovery is meant to be used in between fights, you know? You kill someone, you're low HP, and then you wait for cauterize and then pop it after the fight. But this is kind of used before the fight, to power up your team and then go in. So, yeah, that is my magic shield tip. Another thing to consider is that you can't animation cancel with the ultimate anymore, which makes me so sad. So if I press E and then press Scamper, I can't do the animation cancel, which honestly feels really bad as someone who got super used to that. But there are a few ways that you can kind of counteract this sort of negative aspect of the ultimate. For example, you can magic shield, and then you can ult. Before, you would ult and then immediately magic barrier, and you'd sort of do that tech where you get right up on top of somebody, you turn immortal, you eat them, num num num. But instead, if you have a bit more pre-planning and forethought, you can cast the magic shield and then go in with the cookie. And still have a lot of HP while you're chowing down on the treat, and any damage you sustain, if you do survive, will be healed back up by the fact that it heals you, for true healing, 50% of your health. Another thing, of course, is that the Scamper is infinite, so you can kind of snipe someone like this Fernando, and you have a few seconds to get in there with your infinite Scamper and take him down, although this is significantly riskier. Ultimately, the ultimate... I didn't mean to say it like that, but the ultimate is, on support Moji, I would argue more of a defensive tool rather than a strictly offensive tool like it was with flank Moji. Because, yeah, the tech being gone makes it a little bit harder to confirm the ultimate. The old magic barrier being gone makes it harder to confirm, but it can be a very powerful anti-dive tool, which is important because even with all of this HP, Moji is still pretty easy for the enemies to dive. She is very large, as you can see, very easy to headshot, and even with Scamper, she's still pretty easy to catch up to for many flanks and many other characters with good mobility. She has no vertical mobility, and she also has to be pretty close to the fight because she has to be this close to the teammates to do her healing and do her damage. So, keeping this around when a flank dives you is very, very nice. Or you might have to synergize with your team a little bit better to actually secure the cookie more consistently, because it's going to be harder to do that with support Moji. So, for example, you could have Makoa hook somebody, follow your Makoa around, and then ult whoever he hooks. Or you could just have a teammate, you know, maybe protect you with a bubble while you go in. So you'll have to think of some synergies with it as well. It can still be very powerful, but it is a little bit harder to confirm than the previous ultimates. And it's not because the ultimate's changed, it's because her kit has changed. And in general, when it comes to positioning with this character, you kind of want to think about her in some ways like how you would position with a Scorch Fernando, in the sense that you want to be trying to line yourself up to hit as many targets as you can with your spray and with your spit. Because if you're trying to heal your teammates and you can get a teammate lined up with an enemy where you can hit both of them, then you're going to be significantly more impactful for the team fight than if you were just hitting one target alone. So keeping in mind that you have this linear pierce is very important, and you should be trying to think actively about how you can get the most value out of that, because that's really where you're going to see this character shine, and it'll be the difference between a good Moji player and a bad Moji player at the end of the day, in my opinion. You know, depending on if you can actually take advantage of the pierce and live to tell the tale, versus if you're just playing it safe, only hitting one person, but being significantly less impactful. So, bear that in mind as well. And also, once again, she can bunny hop. They originally got rid of that, but they added it back, so yay! But yeah, I think I've been rambling on enough, so that's going to do it for my sort of day one guide for Moji here. If you guys found this to be helpful, if you enjoyed, make sure to drop a like on this video, subscribe if you're new around here, and also if you want to support the channel directly and buy the event pass for the new Moji skin, then I would definitely recommend going on over to my Nexus at nexus.gg/AndrewChicken. There you can buy crystals and support the channel directly in the process. It's officially affiliated with Feudal Mojo and is a great way to support the channel. But with all that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you all next time. Peace out.